We had a session last week, and we spoke to our teachers from Rwanda, from Uganda, India, the United States of America, and they also were able to give us a perspective of what is happening in their respective countries and what they are doing to ensure that learning continues for their children. They had some wins and they had some challenges which they shared with us, and that's what we hope to hear from our presenters today. Of course, they're going to give us a perspective of what's happening in their countries, how much learning has been affected, and what they are trying to do to ensure that learning continues, and what wins they have experienced, and what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing as well. So just to give us a very quick snapshot, I'm sharing something just to give us an understanding of how much we have been affected. So if you can see on your screen, I'm sharing a map. This is a map that UNESCO did as they were trying to give us a breakdown of how much learning has been affected. So for instance, in Kenya, you can see we have a total of approximately 15.3 million learners who have been affected by this pandemic. And you can also see a breakdown of how many females and how many males have been affected, and how many students from pre-primary, primary, secondary, and tertiary have been affected. So based on these numbers, you can clearly tell that a lot of children are at home, and we are aware that our government has told us that learning is continuing using radio and television. How effective and efficient this is, we will find out from Ms. Millicent, who is a teacher in Kenya. She will come in and explain to us. Then we look at, this is Nigeria, because Uzo Amaka will be speaking to us and giving us a perspective from Nigeria. And you realize that a total of 39.4 million learners are affected in Nigeria, and you can tell how many in pre-primary, how many in primary, how many in secondary, and how many in tertiary have been affected. So of course, Ms. Uzo will come in and explain to us what these numbers mean, and how this has impacted on them as teachers, and how they're trying to reach their students who are at home, and what wins they have and what challenges they have. Then we look at UK. Trying to get, yeah. So for UK, we realized that 15.4 million learners have been affected by this pandemic. And you can see a breakdown in terms of the level of learning, the numbers that are being shown on the screen. So of course, Jackie will come in and explain to us these numbers and what they're trying to do to ensure that learning continues for their various learners. Then when we come to South Africa, and of course, we're trying to get Ms. Ini on board. She's having technical challenges, but we will get her on board to speak to us about what's happening in South Africa. And you can see a total of 2.6 million learners have been affected in South Africa. And you can see the breakdown in terms of levels of learning that have been affected by this pandemic. So having said that, and having given you those numbers, you can clearly tell that those who have been largely affected are from the pre-primary, primary, and secondary levels. Tertiary have a good number, yes, but those who have been affected are from high school going down. So, Uzo Mak, are you okay? Please turn on your microphone. Okay, so we'll proceed. So we have a list of speakers we have lined up for you, and we have Ms. Ini from South Africa. Ms. Ini is a teacher at Gansa International College, and she teaches senior and what in South Africa they call future education and training, and she teaches from grades 8 to 11, and she has been teaching for almost 10 years. So when she comes in, she'll give us she'll explain to us what future education and training is in South Africa. And then we have Miss Millicent Moyeri. Miss Millicent Moyeri is a teacher at, she's a trained teacher, and she currently teaches at Diamond Junior School, and she currently is engaging learners from grade 4, and she has a learning experience of about 8 years. Then we have Jackie Umbella, who is in the United Kingdom. Jackie is, she has taught in Britain from secondary to college level for about 17 years. And she initially trained as a teacher in Kenya before she moved to England. And she is currently also a lecturer. Then we have Miss Uzo Amaka, who is from Nigeria. Miss Uzo teaches at a school known as Holy Ghost British School in Anambra, Nigeria, and she teaches junior secondary school, and she is also the vice principal at the school. So we will not get into so much time so that we are not behind schedule. I'd just like to inform our presenters that each of them will have approximately roughly 10 minutes to give us a perspective of what's happening in their countries, how the learners have been affected. Okay, Uzo, somebody is sorting that out. How the learners have been affected and what they are doing to ensure that learning continues. So Ms. Mtoti is trying to get some help. We'll get her on board once she has. So I'll go to Ms. Millicent Moyeri. Ms. Millicent, you have 10 minutes. Hello? Hello?
Harry, please go do your work. Ariana, this is the last time I'm telling you that.
Yes. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. This is Millicent from Diamond Junior School. So I'll go straight to the. On. Good morning.
Good morning, Millicent.
Okay.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, I'll go straight to the overview of education sector in Kenya. And I'll take you back to 1963. After Kenya gaining her independence, we had the 7423 system, which was established and designed to provide 7 years for primary school, 4 years for lower secondary education, 2 years for upper secondary school, 3 years for university education. And this kind of system was designed so that it could cater for the immediate need for skilled workers to hold positions previously held by the British government. Now, when you get to 1985, when the 844 system was launched, and it was designed that we had 8 years in primary school, 4 years secondary school, and 4 years in university education. And the emphasis was placed on mathematics, English, and vocational subjects, whereby the vocational subjects were aimed at preparing students who would not continue with education. Now, where we are right Okay, continuation with the CBC. So the CBC is designed to emphasize the significance of developing skills and knowledge and applying these competencies to real life situations. And we have 7 competencies for the CBC curriculum, which are communication and collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving, imagination and creativity, citizenship, learning to learn, self-efficacy, and lastly, digital literacy. In the same, we also have CBC Life Values, whereby we have at the end of the learning period, the learner should have been molded to have the following: the values of love, responsibility, respect, unity, patriotism, and lastly, integrity. The structure of the CBC is as follows. We have 26333, whereby we have 2 years in pre-primary, 3 years in lower primary, whereby we have grade 1, 2, and 3. 3 years in upper primary, we have grade 4, 5, and 6. 3 years in lower secondary, where we have grade 7, 8, and 9. 3 years in senior school, grade 10, 11, and 12. And lastly, for the higher education, which should at least take 3 years, depending on the course one is undertaking. So the CBC in Kenya has been enrolled up to grade 4 at the moment, and it's running concurrently with the 844 system, which is being progressively being phased out. So I'll go a short while just to discuss a bit of the difference between the 844 and the CBC, whereby the 844 was a knowledge-based curriculum, while the CBC is competency-based. And then we had know-it-all for the teachers, like the teacher was the source of all the information in the 844. And then the CBC teacher is just a facilitator, facilitating learning. So that is just a brief overview of education in Kenya. So at the moment we have a system called the CBC. Now I'll go directly to how COVID-19 has impacted learning in our country, Kenya. So it was March 15th, 2020, and the Kenyan government definitely closed or shut down schools. And then when, since schools closed, the Ministry of Education and the other agencies have initiated online and technology-mediated learning on TV, radio, tech apps, and mobile phones. So while such learning is taking place in urban areas for many marginalized children in remote areas, including refugee camps and those in disability centers, learning during this COVID-19 school closures is a deep challenge for such learners. So learning mediated through EdTech remains out of reach for many disadvantaged children due to connectivity challenges. For instance, the remote parts of Kajiado, we have Narok, Samburu, Turkana, Kilifi counties, In these kind of areas, electricity does not reach such areas, therefore excluding such learners from the process of learning, from online learning. So if there is no electricity, online scheduled activities cannot take place. So additionally, smartphones are beyond the reach of most rural communities and where adults have tensions around kids. For instance, you know what comes with the unsupervised usage of internet for kids. So there's that kind of tension when it comes to parents leaving their gadgets with learners. Yeah. Then where technology and electricity exists, the cost of internet is very high, very, very high. And such disadvantage present challenges for rural families and learners who must compete nationwide with peers. So that is a great challenge. We have what we call learning loss due to quarantine and curfews imposed by government. This extended emergency closure will have a negative impact on learning. For rural children of parents with low literacy levels and limited education resources, learning loss is heightened, so much heightened. Therefore, parents are frustrated because they cannot facilitate learning. And then online is not effective for students already behind, and radio learning cannot replace classroom at all. It cannot replace classroom. So school closure have implications for learners who rely on school feeding programs in marginalized areas. So feeding programs and sanitary towels, which were provided for maybe the girls. With everybody at home, families' ability to provide food for their children has been reduced. And the question is, do you rather buy food or pay for education? Of course, you'll go for the food and rent. Another challenge is there is a prolonged closure of schools, which could lead to increased child labor, especially for the marginalized areas, and school dropouts. Children are going to drop out of schools. Child sexual violence, that is going to happen. Exploitations, child exploitations, and loss of jobs for non-teaching staff. Not only for non-teaching staff, but also the teaching staff, which has already happened in Kenya. We have teachers already right now who do not have jobs because the institutions cannot or are not able to support them during this pandemic. The third part of this question, we have what are you doing to ensure learning continues? I'll begin with the school, my school, Diamond Junior School, where I work in Nairobi. We couldn't bear the shame of looking at learning loss. So these are the measures that we put in place to help learners continue the process of learning. Consequently, with the help of our school administration, we've initiated ways of ensuring that learning is progressive, and therefore we've done the following. We use Google Classroom for sending pre-recorded or just sending assignment to learners. We also use slides for recording videos to be able to send to learners. Then we also use Zoom meetings for live stream, in which we are able to reach out to the learners and organize for remedial lessons where necessary. So learners are still get access to learning materials such as textbooks because we are able to scan them and send them to wherever they are back at home. And I want to take this time or initiative just to say bravo to our ever supportive parents who, despite their busy schedule, tight financial status, even working from home, still find time to supervise their children's schoolwork and ensure that they submit the work for learning. Then schools, I also want to thank our school, Diamond Junior School, for providing laptops for every teacher and also providing the means of transport to the working place to ensure that we facilitate learning. I'll go on to the government, what the government has done. The government has provided the following interventions It has provided radio and TV broadcast through community channels. It has also strengthened the Kenya Education Cloud at KICD so that teachers have access to digital content. It has also provided live stream for model lessons for peer learning and continued improvement in delivery of content. Also has created awareness of radio and TV lessons for KICD through parents' mobile and through speakers mounted on vehicles to appreciate digital and distance learning programs. Also, it is also sensitizing parents with the mobile phones and other stakeholders through local radio channels to reach out to those parents without mobile phones. We have parents who do not have mobile phones in Kenya, and address them in local languages so that they can know the importance of logging into the online learning. And then also it has identified, reprinted, and distributed information about education and materials to people across the country. I want to talk about the challenges that has come with the intervention to ensure learning continues. So in as much as we're trying to go online, we also have challenges on the ground as teachers. So not every home has internet connectivity, not every home, especially for the private sectors whereby we're trying to go online using Google Classroom and all that. Not every home has internet connectivity, and therefore, not everyone can afford it. In fact, internet is very expensive in Kenya. This might pose a challenge to a few private schools who are relying on Google products to reach out to the learners. So we do rely on the Google products to reach out to the learners. And therefore, if the learners and the families do not have good internet connectivity, that is going to pose a challenge. And next, COVID-19 found everyone unprepared, and therefore there's financial constraint, which bars some of the families from affording the online classes with the private sector of education. So the little that people have, they have automatically, they redirected them to providing the two basic needs. At the moment, we only have two basic needs, which is food and shelter, because most of us who live in towns, we got to pay rent. Then we also have lack of devices and internet access. Unlike other countries whereby these devices are being distributed to students, Kenya has not yet reached this point. So most private schools are continuing with online classes, unlike government schools, of which I said government schools that are doing the radio and TV teaching, of which the programs are not accessed by all the people or all the people living in this country, because others, especially those from marginalized areas, are not able to acquire the services. So this leaves many students in bad spots where they are unable to receive education. Moving forward, schools have also shut. They shut down indefinitely, and they cannot afford for the online classes due to dependency on the parental support, which is underserved during this COVID-19. So this point goes to the private schools whereby they depended on the parents for the support for the continuity of the programs running in the school. So consequently, teachers and the support staff have lost jobs, people have lost jobs. And we also have some schools in which, okay, we have the online going on, but there's a slash on the salary, which is not even enough for their needs. And then the question is, where is the learner left at? In as much as teachers have lost their job, support staff, where is the learner left at? They have all gone back to the government radio and TV programs, which is a backup, but then that is not enough. And then with the government programs, maybe it will reach a point whereby exams will be set. And the challenge will be in conducting and supervision of learning assessment during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so we also have exclusion of the poor, vulnerable, and marginalized students. and schools, especially learners with disabilities, those inhired to serve and inform settlements in access to online and TV lessons. In as much as the government is trying to put forward the TV and radio programs, not everyone in this country is access to it. Another big challenge that we are having, both for the government and the private sectors of education, we have what we call uncooperative parents, because they're not well informed of the measures, maybe of the government have put in place for the continuity of the education of their learners. Now, I'm going to dwell on the last question or point on some of the learning we have based on how the pandemic has affected learning. So what are some of these learning that we have? So the Ministry of Education shared guidelines for enhancing teaching during pandemic in partnership with the KBC, which is in full Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. We also have radio programs are being broadcast on all weekends on multiple radio channels. That is Radio Taifa, Iftini FM. All that is being used by the Ministry of Education so that teaching or learning takes place. We also have education television broadcasts have begun on education channels, TV owned by Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development, KICD, broadcasting schedules for television. Programming is made available in the website. So when you go to the website, you're able to get the schedules, programs for learning. Then thirdly, this television programming is made available as live stream, as on-demand content via KICD Education TV Kenya YouTube channel. Yeah. All right. So learners can also access digital learning resources from Kenya Educational Cloud. We also have Kenya Civil Aviation, KCAA, in partnership with the Alpha, and Telcom Kenya has been having Google Loom balloons floating over Kenya airspace, carrying 4G base stations just to support the internet to be used. And then lastly, Safaricom, a mobile network operator, has partnered with Eneza Education, Longhorn Publishers, and many others to support primary and secondary education for students with free access to education on e-content. And then private schools have really invested in the use of Google products such as Google Classroom, Zoom Meet, Google Slides in pre-recorded videos. So that is the end of my research on that. And I would like to pass the mantle to the host.
We cannot hear you.
Steve, can you hear me? Okay, thank you so much. So yes, thank you so much, Ms. Millicent, for that presentation and for giving us a breakdown of what's happening in Kenya and for what's happening at your school, which is very good. At least you're trying to engage the learners using the different platforms that are available. And thank you for making us realize that even as we try to ensure that learning continues, we have those who are in poor and remote areas that we have to consider. And we also have persons with disability who are also affected by this pandemic and are also Kenyans who are learners who we also have to consider. So without taking too much time, I'd like to invite Jackie Umbella from the United Kingdom to give us a perspective of what's happening in the UK. Jackie, you have 10 minutes. Please unmute.
Is that better?
Yes,
Hello?
much better.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me come here and talk about what's happening in Britain today in regards to education. Now, of course, Britain has been really badly hit by coronavirus. And I think the main thing that everybody, every critic of the government is mentioning is the lack of quick response by the government. And the government in power right now is a conservative government, which is very much keen to please and also to keep the economy going. I mean, and the Prime Minister has been criticized for prioritizing British economy over the safety of British people. And we see now the death toll in Britain has gone to near 40,000, 37,000. I think today we are around 37, 38,000. Now, the thing about school closures, it was nearly the entire Europe had closed schools, but British schools remained open for a very, very long time. And there was a lot of concern about that. And the idea was actually to keep schools open throughout. I don't think the Conservative government had any intention to close schools. But then I think you know, there was a lot of pressure, you know, from union bosses and also from parents to close down schools, because there was this idea of children, you know, being the biggest spreaders of the virus. Now, so on the 23rd of March, schools eventually closed, UK schools. Now, we as teachers, we only had about 2 days to prepare before our schools had to close. But then the good thing is that not every school needed to close, because a directive was issued that, you know, we had to keep the schools partly open for key worker children. So children of doctors, teachers, nurses, policemen, and all the front worker children. So any child who was considered child of a key worker was expected or was allowed to go into school. So my school, for instance, remained open throughout the pandemic, and it's still open. However, what we do, we work, I work in inner London, central London, and we are doing a rotational program where kids come in. Every child that requires to come in will come in. However, staff rotate, because we do not want to have many members of staff in school at the same time. Now, apart from key worker children, we also had children who are on what we call EHCP. So EHCP is an education and healthcare plan. So any child who has an education and healthcare plan also was allowed to go into school. Was not expected, but rather allowed. So so these are children with disability, children with mild learning disability, children who are looked after by the councils. So all these children were also, I mean, their schools also remained open so that they could go in if the parents deemed it okay for them to go. Now, the biggest challenge with school closures that I can actually say, as highlighted in the media, has not really been the learning aspect. It has mainly been the idea that by closing schools, we have made it difficult for children who are on free school meals. The UK uses a system where children who are from low-income families are given a free school meal at school. And also there is a breakfast club for all children to attend. So the breakfast club, where they have their breakfast at school, most primary schools and secondary schools have breakfast clubs. So, and some FE colleges, further education colleges as well. Now, so this had to be, with schools being closed, these children would not have access to these free meals that they were very much reliant on. So that was a huge challenge for teachers especially, and the worry that these low-income families would not be able to adequately feed the children. So what many teachers did was, I saw a deputy head teacher continuing the free school meal throughout the closures. And what he did was drop off meals to children's houses. And but what the government caught up with that and decided to introduce vouchers, okay, for these families. So the schools sent off vouchers every single week that the parents could then go to the local supermarket and get food that way. So that was the biggest challenge. How are these low-income families going to continue providing food for these young people? And of course, it was solved fairly solved. But I do believe that low-income families still struggled in a way. However, there is also an initiative, a feeding initiative that was introduced by the government, where low-income families or families that had a problem leaving the house, so and someone who could perhaps not go shopping because of a medical need, so they therefore used a portal. There was a government portal that they used to feed in their details. And right now, what happens every single week, these families get a food package every single week, once a week. So a box of food is dropped in to their addresses all over the UK. And that has been done really, really well. So that's what has happened. That was the biggest challenge. The challenge was not really with the learning aspect, but rather the feeding program. That is a very important part of the way that the UK organizes itself, because many children live in what we consider poverty. Right. So the main thing in terms of learning, how learning was, has continued through the lockdown. The lockdown, as I say, began on the 23rd of March. So we've only been on lockdown for 2 months now. Now, during that period, what we did as teachers, we had a very, very short time. We literally had a 2-day warning from the government that the schools were going to close. Now, within that 2 days, we had to prepare learning packages for our students. I'm a head of department, so I had to make sure my subject had enough resources to send out to children. So I had to coordinate all the teachers and make sure everyone had packages ready to send off to children. Now, what we did, therefore, that before the kids went off on that Friday, we made sure every child had a package in their bag. And also that's when we started coordinating online learning from there. Now, we did what you call a risk assessment on platforms, a few online platforms, learning platforms, and most of the platforms were not suitable to use for students. So we haven't really used any online platforms due to child protection issues. So what we've continued to do, to visit children at home. So we have, like in my school, every member of staff has 1 or 2 teaching assistants. So I have my teaching assistant in charge of making phone calls home. So she has to call all the children every single week to find out how they are. And then she has to get in her car and drop off resources, learning resources for those children who don't have proper internet access. Or nearly every child has internet access, but the issue is that we had a situation where some children were not responding to the emails that we were sending them. So that duty therefore fell on the teaching assistant to make sure she went around and visited all the children. Now, one thing that we did as well, we tried to use a lot of online platforms to, one very good resource, the BBC Bite Size, BBC website was really good for resources. So we sent off emails with resources from websites like BBC Bite Size. We also tried to use live worksheets. There is a very nice program called Live Worksheet where the child will actually do the work online and then submit it. But the work is already marked by the time it comes back to the teacher. So we used a lot of online platforms, but then mainly email based. We did not do classrooms. We did not do any classroom meetings, online classroom meetings, because of, again, child protection issues. Now, there are plans now to reopen schools on the 1st of June. Now, this is where, partly reopen UK schools. Now, the number of people dying per day has gone down tremendously. I think yesterday it was less than 100, I believe. So for that reason, it was recently announced that the schools were going to reopen for some year groups. So the year 1 kids are going to go back, and the year 6, they're going back on the 6th of June. That's primary side. However, for universities, we have been continuing university teaching online. FE colleges, most further education colleges have also been continuing. However, primary and secondary schools have mainly been using online platforms to send off work to kids. There's not been enough active teaching online. It's just been sending off work and receiving it back. Now, most schools have also made available electronic devices for kids. My school, for instance, made sure every child got an iPad. So we sent off iPads to all children. We dropped them off. The teaching assistants dropped the iPads off and had them all set up for any child who did not have the electronic devices at home. And I know that the government also rolled out a laptop program where families received laptops as well. Now, the problem with reopening schools on the 1st of June, I'll just finish with that, is that there has not been a very good organization from the government. Now, again, the government in power is very, there is a lot of criticism because of their, the way that they're doing things. Of course, they're very, very keen on the economy resuming. However, there is not enough plans in place to make sure that teachers will be safe. One of the things that people are not happy about is that there are no proper plans put in place to ensure that when kids return on the 1st of June, the children will be safe. And secondly, teachers will also be safe. Now, there is, and there's also another issue where there is not enough guidance given to school bosses. They're told that they can reopen. So the information coming from the government is very, very vague. It's not compulsory to open on the 1st of June. Okay, so meaning some schools can decide to remain closed. So it's all not very well organized, and also the lack of proper safety in place from the government when schools resume on the 1st of June. And of course, some people have termed this schedule reckless. They've called their old idea of schools reopening on the 1st of June a reckless plan by the government, because there's not enough in place to ensure that we will be safe when we return to work. And of course, they've left a lot of flexibility and freedom for certain type of schools, what we call the academy trusts. The academy trusts are self-governing. So for that reason, they've been told that they've got a flexibility. They can decide whether to open or not. And that actually puts a lot of pressure on the main government schools, mainstream schools, because there is not and I mean, there is no clear directive from the government. So that's the biggest challenge at the moment. Otherwise, learning has been going on throughout. We have our meetings online. Some of us teachers are working mainly from home. Myself, I've mainly been working from home, going in once in a while. Now, we have managed to record videos and send off to children through email. But in general, learning has been continuing, but not to the same level that it was initially before schools closed. Now, of course, the children with parents who are with less education may not be able to access learning as well as children who from middle class families. So there has been a lot of inequalities, exposed through this pandemic, really. And I think that's all. I think that's 10 minutes, slightly more, I apologize. So I think that's in short, that's the UK. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss. Thank you so much, Jackie, for that presentation and for giving us a perspective of what's happening in the UK. Yeah. And I'd like to tell you that we can actually identify with the free meals, because even in Kenya, we have a schools feeding program that is done in public schools. And I'm sure children who have benefited from that program have really felt the impact and are probably going hungry, because there are places in Kenya where children go to school because they can actually get that meal. So I'm sure they've been affected. And I'm also sure that in terms of safety measures, even in Kenya, the government is talking of reopening schools, and we are a bit worried about the safety measures. We are yet to hear the safety measures they've put in place to ensure that even as children go back to school, the teachers and the children and everyone in the school will be safe. So thank you so much, Jackie, for that presentation. I'd like to go to Miss Ini. So what will happen with Miss Ini is because she has she has a bit of a technical problem from her end, we will hear from her, but through a call, so that she can be able to give us a perspective of what is happening in South Africa. So, Miss Ini, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, you're on now. You can give us a perspective. Please note if you can hear Miss Ini, please. Miss Ini, please go ahead. They're listening.
Okay. A good day to you, colleagues. Eni Mtoti. I teach at Dancer International College in Pretoria. I'm a Zimbabwe national, and aims to empower, to encourage learners, and to correct the wrongs of the past apartheid era. So you'll see that from the primary to high school, the education system pampers learners a bit much and actually encourages laziness, in that some learners who do not put in adequate effort pass and easily get promoted to the next grade. The CAPS curriculum, which is being used, has quite a lot of loopholes, of which some of the learners and parents can abuse. And in addition, the system enables less deserving learners to pass, which becomes unfortunate when they get to university level, where they have to compete with the rest of the world. And you find out that in the first year, about 30% of them either repeat or they fail, or they change the degree programs altogether due to the fact that they cannot cope. Right. On the statement number 2, which was asking us how COVID-19 affected our learning. It has affected people in a lot of ways. It has created uncertainties about the future, especially of the learners. It brought out differences of learner backgrounds, with the elite continuing with school as they could do some e-learning, while the greater population was left behind. The greater population, we are talking about the less privileged, who lack basic needs like clean drinking water, food, and shelter, which makes e-learning to them a want and not a need. So it barred them from getting any education during the lockdown. It has also demoralized learners as they cannot focus. The learners now they have a fear of going back to school since they have lost touch. So there is that fear of unknown. It has also brought about social disorientation as some had to go back to their provinces or countries of origin. Since the lockdown, the president had told people that they had to be in their places of origin so that there was no movement. So you realize that hotels, motels, and other student accommodation facilities had to be closed down. So these learners had to move back to their provinces where they originate from, which created an unnecessary financial constraint. On the third part, what are you doing to ensure that education continues? Okay, generally, a lot of people, educators, lecturers, and also the media, it has been assisting in the study by using internet or online sources of information. WhatsApp groups and online study groups have also been formed so that those become bases of learning for our learners. You can also see that there is a program called Mindset that is on our DSTV. These have been great learning platforms for learners. These things can afford. What are some of the challenges that come with intervention put in place to ensure learning continues? Okay, we've got so many challenges. Like I have said before, that a lot of our learners come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So you realize that they are not always on the e-learning groups due to shortages of finances for data bundles. And some of them, they also lack computer accessories, closure of libraries, which was an access to books and internet cafes. It has also disadvantaged those learners from disadvantaged backgrounds who would want to do researches away from school. And then there is also that fear due to personal health insecurities. Right now, when we ask our learners, nobody is really sure of what this pandemic is all about. Nobody is sure of the future concerning this pandemic. And as much as they would want to go back to school, they are also worried about how they will manage to be free from the virus. So you see that also as we lose contact with our learners, with our lecture supervisors, it makes that drastic change from the classroom environment whereby we had constant contact with learners, which in a great there is also a danger. There is a danger of fast-tracking half-baked graduates into the job market. This also pushes learners who are not prepared to move from one grade to the other. Because right now, when you look at it, we have lost almost half of the academic year. And efforts are being put to try and catch up. These are learners who struggle on a daily basis when they have the normal hours without pandemic. So when there is such a pandemic, and already we've got a metric group that is the last year in high school. These learners, they already are under pressure to perform. Worse when they have to be fed with a lot of information at once, since people want to make it to the examination dates of the end of year. Also with the final year's adversities, you realize that even though they are the first ones to go to school, to go back to school around the 1st of June, you find out that a lot of time has been lost, which could have been earmarked for researches, for discussions, for peer learning, and also for that one-on-one with supervisors. You'll find out that this has not just affected the learners' education, it has also affected their health, not just the mental health, but physical health as well. Because we've got some learners who rely on school feeding schemes. So they have been relying on school feeding schemes to get at least 2 healthy, nutritious meals in a day. So with the closure of schools, it meant that these learners can no longer have that ready supply of food. Peer education, like I said, it has reduced learner performance, because some of them who can even afford to be on the WhatsApp groups, if they see that their friends are not on the WhatsApp groups, they can deliberately withdraw their presence from the WhatsApp group, because they know when we open schools, we will still repeat what the educator was teaching us over the lockdown period, of which it becomes a challenge to I as an educator. To add to the woes of this lockdown due to the pandemic, we've got vandalism of schools countrywide, which is adding more headaches to the Department of Education. Close to about 1,500 schools countrywide, they have been vandalized. Some has been torched, as in they've been burnt. Some material from schools have been stolen. So you realize that even when we go back to school, we are going to face a lot of challenges other than social distancing and keeping to our personal hygiene. These learners will not have resources to use because some of the schools have been burnt to the ground. In private learning institutions, foreign educators have been disadvantaged a lot because they could not get any remuneration, which even hampered their efforts to be in contact with learners via e-learning, because apparently there are problems with what we call the UIF, which is a fund meant for the unemployed. So you'll find out that most of these private institutions, they pay far less than the government does. So with these foreign educators, you realize that they do not have enough savings to take them for 3-4 months without having a salary. We in South Africa have got a lot of child-headed families. This has been due to diseases like HIV and AIDS, and also we have some parents abandoning their kids or leaving their kids to be taken care of by their grandparents who are too ill or too old to work. So at the end of the day, you find out that we've got a lot of child-headed families. So with lockdown due to the pandemic, you find out that most of these can hardly scrounge for food. So you cannot even talk about e-learning to these children. But education is a right to each and every child, despite the learner's background, race, color, or age. So you find out that the pandemic has affected them a great deal. And this not just affects their education, but also psychological, because they have got nobody to turn to. and they adjust on their own. Then I realized that, like some of these in South Africa as a whole, they've got children who are battling with alcohol and drug addiction. You'll find out that some schools were offering spiritual guidance, counseling sessions to such learners. We also have some learners who have been abused. It can be physically, emotionally. These have been getting some sort of counseling, and also they have been made to feel at home when they are at school. But now, due to the lockdown, their support system has been drastically cut. So we are having dangers of these children who were now recovering from addictions, going back to the addictions that they were trying so hard to fight. I just made, can I say, a funny realization to say, since I'm a geography teacher, I say every time, whatever disaster, whatever issues that we have, there are some positive impacts that come from it. So I just have a few positive impacts that came from this pandemic. We've got lots of us educators and learners sharpening skills in computer literacy, and also it has encouraged all sectors of the economy, because the pandemic has affected the socio-economic standing of our country. So it has made sure that all sectors are working together to reach out to almost each and every individual who is reeling from the pandemic. Even though not all people are going to be positively impacted, but a lot of organizations, non-profit organizations, even the government, they have also tried to reach out to the people who have been ignored for so long. And then the learners also have acquired some levels of discipline, as some of them have tuned into the programs that are offered on television, educational programs, and also with these WhatsApp groups. They have tried, to those who have tried, they have maintained discipline. Because it's difficult to instill discipline in learners who have always been given all the information, and who, when you tell them to study, they think studying is a hassle. But right now, the lockdown has also encouraged them to study on their own. Then the last aspect, which is number 5. What are some of the learnings you have based on the pandemic? I have discovered that, taking into account that pandemics are just like natural disasters, they disrupt all the aspects of our economy, our social status, our spiritual status. Some mitigating factors can be put in place to avoid a huge extent on instability if they are to occur again. So here in South Africa, personal hygiene has been taught and it has been embraced in a short space of time, but this is going to stretch for the next generations to come. So I don't think we are going to have people dying in large numbers because of pandemics that have anything to do with personal hygiene, like in the years before. And then we have the incorporation of e-learning. Even though it can still be improved, it has been honed in such a way that very soon learners can actually work on their own without too much supervision at home, as long as they have the e-tools to use. Then the Department of Education, it has also learned to partner with communities so that children from disadvantaged backgrounds can have their meals whether schools are open or not. This, we have seen it on the TV when they were issuing out food parcels from different companies and from different religions, different races, they were coming to identify these child-headed families, of which this, I think, is going to continue even after the pandemic has long gone. And then we also have the Department of Education having been taught to be flexible as they plan annually and to be accommodative of educators, learners, and parents in the planning of the curriculum. Normally, what has been happening was the Department of Education would just send educators with the ATP, which is the annual teaching plan, for the year, for all the grades, without consulting with the educators to say, you guys, do you think you manage for the curriculum for that academic year? But right now, the pandemic has encouraged and it has taught the government and other stakeholders that we cannot work in isolation. So this is a lesson that we are going to carry forward in the next generations. Overall, it has been such a challenge for all the stakeholders involved in the education of learners at all levels. So as the government is going to allow schools to open in phases starting from the 1st of June, the fact that there is that uncertainty, they have even put a disclaimer to say, if you are not free to, or if you still feel your child is not ready to come to school, you may retain your child at home, which raises a lot of eyebrows, because here the government does not want to be blamed for not finishing the curriculum, and also the government does not want to be blamed for putting learners' lives at risk. So as much as a lot has been learned, I think this pandemic has brought a lot of confusion, and it's still a mystery that is awaiting a solution. Because even parents are not so sure on whether their children are supposed to go back to school or they are supposed to be retained at home. So you'll find out that even trade unions are voicing to say it's not safe for their members, which is us educators, to go back to school. So as much as we have learned a few lessons from the pandemic to carry it to the following years, we still have a lot to learn, and we still have a lot to involve other countries to see how best they are doing it, to see how best they are accommodating the negative impacts that come with the pandemic. That's all I had to share.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Ini, for that presentation and for accepting to do it via WhatsApp. We really appreciate it. I'm sure the audience have really found it insightful. And two things I've picked out, and I picked out from Jackie as well, is the anxiety around schools reopening. So I'm sure this is something that has gone global, with parents wondering, should schools reopen, what will happen? And again, clearly, we are used to a traditional classroom, but moving forward, we might be forced to embrace e-learning as well as even as we continue with the traditional classrooms that we are used to. So I'll move on to our next presenter, Ms. Uzo. Sorry, Ms. Uzo, for the technical challenges you had earlier. We are glad to have you back. And I'd just like to inform all of us that based on the three presentations we have had, if you have any questions, please feel free to type it on the chat box, so that our presenters can be seeing the questions you have and be preparing to respond once we get to the Q&A question. So please feel free to type the questions you have on the chat box, and then we'll have a Q&A session where the presenters will have an opportunity to respond. So we'll move to Ms. Uzo. Ms. Uzo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Thank you so much. Yes, we can hear you. You have 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity for teachers to express their views and their perspective on this pandemic, COVID-19. Okay, once again, my name is Miss Opalugo Zamaka. I'm from Nigeria, and the name of my school is Divine Race British School, Holy Ghost British School, which is situated in Anambra State, the eastern part of Nigeria. Okay, let me go first of all to the overview of the Nigerian education system. So the Nigerian education system encompasses 3 sectors. So the basic education, which is gotten within 9 years, it's comprised of the primary and the secondary. That's the junior secondary. And then the second sector is the senior secondary. The third sector is the tertiary education. So now, in these sectors, we practice federal system of government in Nigeria, and these sectors are being administered by the three systems: the federal, the state, and the local governments. The basic education, that is the one of a primary education, it's being taken care of by the local governments. Then the secondary education is being taken care of, it's being administered by the state government. And then the tertiary education, it's been administered by the federal government. So now, during this pandemic, when the first index case was reported in Nigeria, this resulted to the lockdowns, which almost everywhere in the world people experienced as well. So in Nigeria, this lockdown is an attempt to curtail the spread of this COVID-19 in Nigeria. So, but the immediate ramifications were evident in the education sector, and the students in Nigeria, witnessed this firsthand. So now, based on the research that I did, I found out that UNESCO already did a research in Nigeria, and they estimated that 35.9 million students out of 39.9 million students in Nigeria, which are mostly the basic education and the secondary education, are out of school because of this lockdown. And So, and out of that 35.9 million students who are in the secondary and the primary, 25.6 million of these students are enrolled as public students, are enrolled in the public school. Let me come to this again. In Nigeria, we have public and private schools, and the public schools are mostly run by the governments, and the private schools, individuals who are capable of running a school with the government approval are the ones that run the private institutions. So now, back to what I was saying. Out of that 5.9 million students who are out of school, 25.6 million are enrolled in the government, are enrolled into primary schools, and out of that 25.6 million students, 87 of those 25.6 million students are enrolled in public schools, and then the remaining 13% are in the private sector. Then in the secondary sector, we have 10.3 million students who are out of school, and out of that 10.3 million students, 81% of that 10.3 million students are enrolled in the public schools, and then the remaining 19% are in the private schools. Why I'm emphasizing this is that in Nigeria, the public schools are being run by the government, and most of the times they are free. So when they are free, there are a lot of things that they can't afford. This means that the parents who can afford to send their kids to the public schools are parents who are on lower socio-economic backgrounds, and the students who are in the private schools are students from higher or medium socioeconomic backgrounds. So now, because of this lockdown, because of the pandemic, these students, majority of these students in the public schools have lost out in a lot of school programs. Example, pardon me, excuse me, have lost out in a lot of school services. For example, learning, feeding programs, and some health services like immunization. These children, they are all now in their homes, locked down. Most of their families are very poor. They can't. The most decent meal they can access in a day is the one that they have in the school. So now, and these students in this category, most of the ones in the public education, in the public schools, most of their parents cannot afford the gadgets that enables e-learning. So you see, the students in this category, they are not really able to get any education at this moment. If this pandemic, if this lockdown continues, they are likely to lose out in education, and there is nothing else that can be done about it except maybe going directly to their homes, which the social distancing may not allow. So, and then their counterparts in the private education sector, their parents are in the higher or medium socioeconomic backgrounds. And these parents, they are willing and are able to buy or pay for any extra resources in order to enable their children or their words to get the education that they need. So this is the system that we find ourselves in Nigeria. Okay, and going to the second question, how this COVID-19 has affected learning. It has affected learning drastically because majority of our students are in these public schools, and the only thing that they can afford, majority of them can afford, is the radio broadcasting that the federal government has instituted most radio stations to start doing. They receive their learning via radio. And you can imagine how in a home a child is just listening to receive education. It's not going to be that effective. Learning, you can't even guarantee that learning has taken place, because there's no way this child can communicate with the school. There's no way this child can ask questions of of any inquiries they want to make. Okay, so this is what we found ourselves in the Nigerian sector. And then the private education, because my school is a private sector, is in the private sector, is being owned by a renowned Catholic priest, Father Bemonso. So in my school, the experience that we have, how we make sure that learning takes place, because of most of the times we know that we have challenges of network and network not being stable at some point in Nigeria and in the parts in our states. So it may be difficult for us to get all of our students to join in a live learning, just like we're doing, or maybe using Zoom, because a lot of schools have adopted Zoom conferencing and a lot of live medias to make sure that they teach their students. But what we did, we already have an established website. We also have a digital library that we have some ebooks. So what we do, we pre-record our lessons. Our teachers, we pre-record our lessons. We use PowerPoints. We use recorded videos. We use links. We create links of ebooks and then links to videos that we want the students to see in order to help them learn, even when they are not in a classroom environment. At least when they're in the comfort of their home, and in the comfort of their home, they are bound to be distractions. So in the comfort of their home, we try to make our lessons be more captivating and to keep the students' attention, to keep the students' attention longer. So this is what we do to ensure that learning takes place. And then also, we also keep in touch with the parents. We tell them to ask us questions via WhatsApp, social media, and then we also, via our website, we also give them assessments, a timed assessment that immediately after the classroom, they can be able to, we will assess them to see how, if they participated actively. So this is how we make sure that learning takes place. But then in my school also, we have like 70% of students who come from higher and medium socioeconomic backgrounds. Then the remaining 30% are students of scholarship. And these students of scholarship, also most of their parents are on the lower socioeconomic background. So we find it difficult, we realize that they can't be able to join in our lessons because they don't have the gadgets that will enable them to receive the learning. So this is our worry. At the end of within this time, we've been finding it's worrying us that if this pandemic continues, this section of our students may not be able to access learning. So going to the next one, which says, excuse me, what are some of the challenges that comes with the intervention we put in place? Okay, the major challenge that we have, just like I said earlier, is that a lot of students do not have access to internet. They do not have access to these technologies that can help facilitate learning or connect them to the school. So, and this is a major challenge for us. Another one is the rapid. Another one is the rapid transition to online learning, which was very abrupt. A lot of teachers do not have this prior training on how to, a lot of teachers who are not technologically savvy, and we didn't have any preparing their classes to the standard that we want. So it's a little bit challenging. But when the lockdown was, it's a little bit but it's gradually becoming better. But if this pandemic continues, a lot of the fractions of students who left out are mostly students who need it most. These students, except the government have a plan of getting electronic gadgets that can help facilitate e-learning, there is nothing else we can do. So now the next one.
Hello, sorry, Miss Uzo, we seem to have lost you. Miss Uzo? We can hear you, but it's not as loud. It's not loud. You need to move.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes. We lost you again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I can hear you. Okay. All right, let me continue. Sorry for that interruption. So I was talking about my learning based on how education has been affected by this pandemic. So Nigeria, like most developing countries, was caught hands down by this COVID-19. I say this because the pandemic signposed the lack of investment in the Nigerian education infrastructure. All well-meaning economists and scholars of development studies have been highlighting the low percentage annual budget that Nigeria invests in education. The percentage is very low. So in this aspect, very known to all stakeholders. Everyone now sees that if the budget, if we don't invest in education, we'll be falling behind in the world standard of education. So the rapid switch from regular classrooms to the virtual classroom through e-learning did not benefit almost 80%, almost 70% of the Nigerian students, because either the student doesn't have the infrastructure or the human capacity did not equal and come close. So, or maybe this did not equal or come close. All the stakeholders in education to understand that a lot of work needs to be done in order for Nigeria to measure up to the global standard, and it needs to begin investing in all sectors of education, especially the STEM education. Because if our children, if we open up and broaden the mind of our children to the possibilities of STEM education, the possibilities of inventing technologies that can help us solve our immediate unique problems, that will go a long way in solving what we are experiencing now. If our government can look in local and realize that it has to invest in our education for these things, for this gap to be able to close, because if we keep looking up to, if we keep looking at importing all our technologies, we will not solve the immediate problems that are unique to our environment. So while no one can prophesy on this era, whether it will be or even it will ever be, I would like to say that it will never be business as usual. The education sector, having been exposed to the strengths of e-learning and the use of technology for education, will not likely abandon all. We will not abandon all that we are using now, because if we cannot go back to what we used to be. So I believe that the government should look in, really look in, and to help curtail what this pandemic has exposed. Okay, this is what I have. All right, thank you very much. I hope I'm able to contribute positively to this webinar. Thank you, Winnie.
Thank you so much, Ms. Uzo, for that presentation. We kept losing you, but at least you kept coming back and giving us what you had said earlier. So I think from what all our presenters have said, it is clear that this pandemic has impacted on all of us, and all the learners are affected differently, but they are all affected. And we also have some similarities with the UK and with South Africa and even with Nigeria. We are all facing affordability issues. We are trying to see how affordable the available platforms are. We are worried about schools reopening. So yeah, thank you for giving us those brilliant presentations. I would want to hand this over to my colleague John, who will take us through the Q&A session, where we will be allowed to ask questions to the presenters, and then we can proceed and see to the summary and closure. So John will take us through the Q&A. If you have any questions, remember, type it on the chat box. We will be able to get it and respond. And you can also use the raising up hand icon on your machine, so that you can raise your hand and we will be able to see your hand, and we will ask you to ask the question you have, and the presenters will respond. So I'll hand this over to John.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Winnie, and we are very grateful to our 4 speakers that have in education. So it was a mix of issues in terms of some common threads in terms of challenges. Of course, various lessons so far, and a few also alluded to some issues in regard to when they plan to, when the schools are likely going to be reopened, based on the different directives that their respective governments have issued. Now, given that we don't have much time, I will go straight to opening this up for any questions. And again, thanks to our different participants So what I will do, I know I've noted 2 questions from the chat box, but I will first open it up for any 3 questions. So please, you can unmute your mic, just introduce yourself and pose your question or make whatever comment that you may have, and you can actually direct it to any of the 4 speakers, or if it's an open question, so well and good. So anyone? So I think what I will do, so the 2 questions, so let me just read out the 2 questions as we wait to see whether there's anyone ready to raise a question, to pose whatever question they may have. So the 2 that I've captured from the chat box, one, and I think 2 speakers alluded to this, and so this is actually open to the 4 presenters, 4 speakers. So the first question is, what interventions do your governments have in terms of for learners with special needs? So interventions that your governments have for learners with special needs. And then the second one is measures taken by your governments or your schools towards helping single parents. So those are the 2, and they're actually open to all the 4 speakers. Let me see whether we have anyone. So you can just bear those in mind as... Okay, it seems as people are preparing, as our participants are preparing to ask questions, I will allow our speakers to respond, and we'll start in the same order. So we'll go first with Millicent, then followed by Jackie, Annie, and then lastly Uzo. So I believe you all captured those 2 questions. So Millicent, please go first. Millicent? Oh, Millicent I don't know that she left. Millicent, so let's, I guess Millicent will be trying to rejoin, so we can, Jackie? Oh, Millicent, you're back?
Okay.
Millicent?
Yeah, I'm here.
Millicent, are you there? Yeah, I believe you captured.
Yeah, I'm here.
You had those 2 questions. Yeah, so please respond to those 2 questions.
Okay, I'll begin with the interventions the government have for the learners with disabilities. So far, so good. Everything is in plan in Kenya. And some of the things that the government has done is doing printout. But I don't think much has been done with the learners with disabilities. But then, okay, disabilities vary in different ways. Maybe things to do with physical disabilities, I don't think much has been done. But then when it comes to maybe disabilities to do with the provision of basic necessities, a lot has been done because the government has offered food to the marginalized areas, those people who are not able to take care of the learners, their children from their homes. And then measures taken by schools to help single parent. Here we are in Diamond Junior School. We're really engaging them. Some of them we call them to come and take some of the materials to school, so that if they cannot afford learning online, we've offered them materials in which they can just read, and we give them instructions accordingly. And then, yeah.
Thank you, Millicent. Let's move on to Jackie.
May I ask what the second question was? What was the second question?
So the second one was measures, what measures either your government or your schools has put in place to help single parents? So, you know, single parents.
Okay, single
Yes,
parent.
yes, yeah. So
Okay.
there are those that have lost their jobs and
Yeah,
they have to
okay.
take care of kids. So yeah.
All right. Now, so I'll start with the children children with disability. Now, special education, special needs children. Now, what happens when a child is identified as having a special need? They are put on what we call an education and healthcare plan. Now, this happens very early on in the child's life. It could happen at the age of 1, 2, 3, or even at birth. So the EHCP therefore means that this child can never be left behind. There's always something going on with the child. So I think what the UK does very well is providing for children. I think that I can commend the UK government. It's very rare that you find a child slipping through the cracks, and basic provisions like food and shelter. Those are government provisions that are mandatory and have to be provided by the government. Whether the child is, don't have status or don't have a parent. I mean, every child has to be cared for by the government. So for that reason, children with special education needs or special needs, whether that be education needs or learning disability, same education or physical disability or any form of disability, really, they are identified earlier on in their lives, and they are put on that EHCP. And once that EHCP is in place, the parents can therefore apply for extra money from the government. Most of the time, children with severe disability tend not to have parents who are working. So parents tend to stay at home to look after them, because if the disability, they are eligible for government support. And of course, we know that the UK government, the UK has a social welfare system which works very well and provides for money for food, accommodation, and all that. So for that reason, parents don't really need to work if they've got children with special severe disability or even mild disabilities. As long as a child is on an EHCP, that child is recognized by the government as a child needing extra support. So apart from the basic money that given by the government for social welfare, children with special needs get extra funding from the government. So there's extra money coming. So the disability is categorized from very severe to slightly, slight or mild disability. So the kids who are maybe non-verbal and perhaps immobile, who have to be helped to dress and feed, such children get more funding from the government every single month. I think it goes up to extra money can go up to maybe even £2,000, 1,500, 2,000 British pounds extra every month. Now, this money is to help the parents move around. Some families even get vehicles to use for moving their children around. So mobility vehicles, so a car that is designed purely for that particular child. So most of these children are the ones who are wheelchair bound. So that's a really good thing that the UK government does. Now, another thing that will happen is that any school that is identified as mild learning disability, mild learning difficulty school, or severe learning difficulty school, any kind of school that caters, or physical disabilities, caters for children on EHCP, they tend to have extra interventions in place. Now, one thing that happens is occupational therapy that's offered in these schools as a basic provision. Another thing that happens is music therapy, swimming therapy, clinical. There is a whole host of things going on when schools are in session for these children. Now, they also go on residentials where they actually get to stay away on a farm for a week, or so there's a lot going on for these children. Now, when schools are closed, as they are now, we cannot access these children and provide the OT sessions, the occupational therapy sessions, which are very, very important, because in most of these schools, you'll find that the first thing you do when you get into class, when the kids come into class, is do maybe 5 minutes of OT. So occupational therapy is very, very important for these children with reduced mobility, or maybe MLD children, especially mild learning difficulties. You find that, I mean, any child with some kind of global delay tends to not have very good, you know, fine motor skills, you know, the way that they hold their pens and all that. So you find that there's a lot of help provided for them at school. So when schools are closed like they are now, we don't really know how these children are accessing this therapies. What I've seen some teachers do, they've recorded videos and they have sent them out to children to do their OT. Now, another thing that we have done, I think as teachers, we've also sent off, some teachers have actually opened their own, you know, YouTube channels to try and reach parents that way, to make sure these programs are continuing. So basically that's what happens with children with special needs. And I think another thing that I could say is that children with reduced, non-verbal children, I've seen many schools retrain teachers to provide CPD courses on Makaton, which is the simple British sign language. So I've seen quite a few teachers doing a lot of Makaton courses online through Zoom, and I think that's intended to reach the non-verbal children as well. I don't know how they're going to do that, but there's a lot of visits happening at home. Teachers and teaching assistants are physically going to door to door visiting these children. Of course, I think that's what's happening so far. The government provides very well, British government provides very well for children with disability. That we cannot fault the government on it at all. Of course, with an austerity government, the Conservative government is really keen on reducing spending after taking over from the Labour government. Now, for that reason, some of the funding for disability provisions were reduced, and there was a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of criticism in the press for the reduced funding, but as a basic provision, it's still very, very good, I must say. Now, concerning children from single parent families, now you find that I think in a democracy like the British country like this, I think that's really not, I don't think it's important. I don't really think it's important, because there's no difference. There's no difference as to whether a child comes from a single parent family household or a two-parent household. I mean, I think the only distinctions that we have are low-income families and families, middle-income families or high-income families. So in a low-income family, what will happen, which I think statistically are mainly children from single-parent families, low-income families, but that's not a standard. Now, you will find that there is extra money coming from the government. The UK has the social welfare system that I've already mentioned. So every single family will be able to feed the children, and I think it's all about the social welfare system, which is a good cushioning for families in Britain in times like this. Now, we know that with crisis like this, Western nations have expanded their welfare system. So the UK government, for instance, has put in a lot of money into the social welfare system. So I think the repercussions for this is that money coming out to in terms of aid to other countries have been reduced, but the welfare system has expanded tremendously. So parents like ourselves are getting extra money in terms of tax returns and tax credits because of to try and make sure that we remain afloat and we have enough money to care for the children. And of course, I also talked about the food parcels that are being dropped in front of doors for families that are perhaps not able to afford enough food. We've seen very large trucks moving around the country, dropping boxes of food in front of families, those doors of those families that require the food. So in terms of whether children are eating, children are cared for, that's not an issue with Britain at all. It's not been an issue at all. I think perhaps the issue will be what happens, the economic downturn of the crisis when we all go back to work. I think that's perhaps where we may see some changes. Yeah, but then of course, because we know the Conservative government are very, confident that the UK economy is very solid. So we don't know how it's going to be, but that is where the problem may be. But in terms of basic provisions, bread and butter issues, that's not a problem with Britain at all.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Hello, Annie?
Government, the way it's dealing with children with special needs, here we've got a grant system, but the child has to be taken in by a parent. There needs to be proof that the child is South African and the child has got a disability. So what then happens is, through what we call the SASSA, it's Social Security, it's there to assist parents to cushion them financially. So you realize that with children with disabilities, they get a monthly fund from the government. But then I would like to say, this fund, as much as it's availed to cushion the child who's got disabilities, you'll find out that some of the parents, they are single moms who drink, the money can be abused. So the government still goes on to put in special institutions for children. There are some that are run by the government and there are some that are run by private institutions. So you'll find out that when the schools are open, there are a lot of transport facilities that are availed to take the children with disabilities from their home to school, where they can be assisted with therapy, with the lessons according to their stages of development, and also where they can showcase their abilities. There is also a special program that has been put in schools where us educators are being empowered to assist children with special needs. So you'll find out that if we've got children who have got an audio impairment, we can teach such a child. So we have been assisted by the government through some training to assist such children. Even though this is very vital, you'll find out that in times like this, during the lockdown, some of the children with disabilities or with special needs, they stay with their grandmothers who cannot even assist them, which means they are going to lag behind with development. For the 3 months that they were not going to school, you will find out that as the schools are to open, I'm not so sure when they are going to start going to school, because right now it's only the grade 7th and 12s that are going to start on the 1st of June, and the last year of universities, the last years. So you'll find out that it's going to be dragged for them to be incorporated back to schools, which can also be a disadvantage to them. The communities that we have these children, it's unfortunate that very few people can assist the children. Like children with blindness, very few people can assist them. And then moving on to how single parents cannot go back to work because they have to stay at home to take care of children. You will find out that this does not just affect the single parents. It is affecting most of the people, because if right now both parents are in those jobs, like they are both doctors or they are both nurses, those jobs that are urgently required their services, still the parents are just as good as a single parent who has to leave the children at home. So you'll find out that other than assisting us as family members within our families, that is, if we live close to each other, the community is now left to take care of these children, depending now with the location of where you are. If you are maybe in high density suburbs, you can speak to a neighbor and then the neighbor can take care of the children. But now a lot of parents are just leaving their children on their own, because nobody is being trusted right now because of the high prevalences of child abuse. It can be by family members, it can be by neighbors. So you'll find out that our doctors, our nurses, they are just going to work. Our security personnel, they are just going to work. And as educators, we are soon going to work. We are just dedicating our services, but at the end of the day, we are leaving our children with nobody to take care of, which becomes not just a negative aspect to my children, but to the community as a whole. Because now I will have to take my children somewhere, and somebody is taking his children to the same position, to the same place, which can even increase the contamination, which can even increase the viral spread. So it's a bit of a challenge, but there is not much the government can do, since the nurseries where we normally leave children are closed. So this is beyond the government, but we as communities, we as family members, we have to help each other so that my children are not left alone, but they have got somebody to take care of. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Annie. Uzo?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, your responses to the two questions?
Okay. My responses to these two questions, first of all, I'll go with the measures that our governments put in place to help students with disabilities. In Nigeria, a lot of things are mostly theoretical. We have these inclusive schools, but most of them don't really have enough resources to take care of these children's needs, especially those of the schools instituted by the government. But majority of our inclusive schools in Nigeria here are being run by non-governmental organizations, and these non-governmental organizations, they are the ones that are solely taking care of the responsibilities of making sure that learning takes place in their school, or their children get the help that they need in this pandemic. But as is here in Nigeria, in Anambra, where I'm located, there is no special, it's not really known, the special help that the government is given, because as I've been listening in, or the research that I've done, I've not really seen a tangible help by the government to this to the students, to this physically challenged, or maybe any type of disabilities, that we have here in Nigeria. The government is really not that active there, because in Nigeria we have a lot of the population that are poor are higher than those that are of the medium class or the high class that can take care of themselves. So they have, first of all, what these people are
what these people are working on is to put food on their table. And the government have put down a lot of palliatives in order to help them during this lockdown. Okay, but they have tried the best they can, but not all the parents. I can say that they may have tackled at least 40% or 30% of this percentage of people who need food. So they've not solved the problem of food during this palliative. So they've not, so coming to that of education, all that our government did was we have these online resources that they have made free for students, but they have made these online resources free for students. Most of the students don't have the gadgets to access this learning. So at the moment, as much as I know, the government didn't put down any assistance. There are no measures to help students who need them, schools who are inclusive, or schools who run schools that have students with disabilities in them. Then the second question, measures that our school is putting into place. Okay, my school, the path, like I said earlier on, we have like approximately 30% of students who are on full scholarship scheme, and these students, most of their parents are on that category. They can't afford the technologies, the gadgets that can help them access the learning that they have. What we planned to do, and which will take place from next week, because we are on holidays this week. From next week, we put into place that we will find a way. We'll give them at least a printout of the learning that we've been doing. We'll find the places that they can, a common place where they can come and observe, because my school is a boarding school, so most of them don't live close. A common place that they can come, and where we can also observe the social distancing and give them the materials at least, so that they don't get cut off, because these students are intelligent students, they're on scholarship, most of them, and we give them these materials and then encourage them to study independently, because at the moment that's the best we can do. If the lockdown is being lifted, or maybe at the end of this pandemic, we pray that we plan also to give them special trade attention, because they have missed out in the online, in the e-learning that we have for the rest of them who can access it. So this is the plan that my school have. But then to answer the other question about helping the single mothers, I am a single mother, and most of the times when I go to work, my child is a little bit of, he's a teenager, he's 13 years old, but it also worries me that he also needs my help to help him access his own online learning. And there is no one here to help him. The point I'm trying to make is that the government doesn't have any plan for us. There is no plan to help single mothers. So it's either your immediate family members who are around, and we also are very careful on the way we move around, so that we don't put ourselves out there at the risk of contracting this virus when we mingle, with people who don't live immediately with us. So at the moment, there's no measures that the government put in place for single mothers. We just have to, we do it ourselves. We just find a way to go around it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Uzo. So we now have another final round, a short final round. And again, I would like to open this opportunity for any of our participants. If there's anyone who has a question. There's one that I see in the chat box. So I think I'll just go ahead and read this out. So there is this question that I will read out, and then I'll pause my. So I think I should put this video. I should pause. I mean, I'll pose a question to at least, I mean, to the panelists as well, because it seems we don't have. And then what I will do, I will also give them an opportunity to respond to those, to just weigh in on this last question, and then turn it back to Winnie for any final remarks in terms of where we go from here. Now, so this is from Dakon Owino, and it's something that I think all the four speakers also alluded to. So the question is, what just your thoughts actually about reopening of schools and how this should be done. Should it be targeted only to or initially to the students who are in their final years, whether at primary, secondary, or tertiary level? Or basically, what are your thoughts about how the reopening of schools should be done? And you can actually tie this to any government communication so far, and I know some of you mentioned this, or directive about opening of schools. And then I have a question to, it's still open to any of the four, but specifically to any for Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria, because these three countries have a devolved system of government. So the question is whether just their thoughts about whether this system of government is better in terms of dealing with this, with the impact, or just basically their thoughts about whether having a devolved system of government helps in terms of, for instance, dealing with this kind of a shock or a pandemic in terms of delivery or in education. So basically your thoughts around that, and any final remarks that you may have. So what I will do, we'll start in the reverse order. So we'll start off with Uzo, Jackie, and then close with Millicent, and then I'll turn it back to Winnie. So Uzo.
Okay. All right. Responding to this question, pardon me. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to get the question. Okay, responding to this question. Okay.
Or you have, is it clear to you?
Please come up with the question. Come up with it again.
Yeah, so
I'm trying to assess the.
Yes, so this is actually in line with what you had shared about any communication that the government may have made so far in terms of when schools should be reopened and how they plan for this to happen. So I think somebody mentioned that this will be done in phases. So the question here is whether what your thoughts are in terms of whether this should be fast or initially targeted to kids or candidates or students who are actually in their final year, whether at primary, secondary, and tertiary level, or just your thoughts about how this should be done. And then I had an additional question around for this, for Kenya, in Nigeria, you mentioned that each of the three levels of government, the state, the federal government, and I think each of secondary school is actually the domain of the state.
Yes.
And tertiary is actually the domain of federal system. So I just wanted to know whether the devolved system of government is helpful in terms of dealing with such shocks in delivery of education services. What your general thoughts are on that here, and any final remarks that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. The first question, let me deal with the first question. In my state here, because my school is a secondary school, so in my state here, the state government have announced, okay, there are speculations. It's not yet official that our schools, the schools in Anambra, will be resuming on the 8th of June. There are still speculations. The government have not said it's final yet. Okay, so, but then the government, the Ministry of Education have reached out to secondary schools, and they gave us the directives of the things we have to put in place to prepare for the coming back of our students. So the plan is that the students in the kindergarten will not be resuming back with the rest of the school, but the primary school will resume. But they will be coming to school in batches, not every day. And then there will be a lot of the social distancing, the 6 meters social distancing will have to be observed both in the classroom and in the school environment. So the idea around schools resuming in batches is that they will have enough space for the students to space out in the classrooms. So now, in the secondary school borders as well, they've also given us the directives of what they're expecting to see when eventually our school resumes. You know, that we have to have very limited amount of people in the hostels, and there won't the bunks. If we run a bunk system, if you're running a bunk system, maybe in the hostels you have bunks instead of a single bed, that they will only have single beds to limit the number of students who live in a room. So in this directive, and there will be they also said that before the school resume, there will be intensive training that will be given to educators, that will be given to teachers to enable them direct children appropriately to observe the social distancing when academic activities resume. But then my thoughts about
Hello? Any? Uzo? Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
it's
yes,
still
please.
very risky at this point. It's still very risky at this point to tell all the school to resume immediately, just like that. Yeah, we have to be cautious about it. We have to make sure that that we observe. If we have to, at least if the classes, the examination classes should be given priority, so that they will get what. Sorry, please pardon me. Calls keep coming into my phone. Am I with you? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please proceed.
Okay. So, the students, we should focus on the students who are in the examination classes. In that way, we will limit the number of people in the school. It will have a manageable size to work with, because if the school comes back as normal, there will be too much population, and children, it will really be difficult to manage them, for them to understand the importance of social distancing. And you have to keep at your beck and call. You have to keep pushing them. You have to keep reminding them that they have to observe the social distancing. So I think we have to, at least the students who are in this category are a little bit matured to understand and handle and observe the social distancing. Then the next one about the tertiary institution. Okay, what the government, sorry, please pardon me, remind me of what the question is about the tertiary institution, the one you asked, the second question.
No, the second was just on whether I was just trying to figure out whether devolved system of government provides a better system in dealing with these shocks. Just your thoughts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
If
dealing with the
thoughts
shocks, right? dealing with the
such
shocks.
kind of shocks. Yes.
Okay. Okay. In our tertiary institution, most of the public ones, like I said earlier, we have public and private schools. The public ones are being run by the states and the federal government. So those majority, some of the tertiary institutions that are being run by the states, some states, like for example Lagos State, most of the states run by the state government in Lagos have effective online learning, e-learning, that they have provided, and it's working at the moment. They are helping their students in all the ways that they need to make sure that this semester or this session doesn't go down the drain with them. They have their will I call it a workshops that they institute online to also help guide them, because I think it's everyone abruptly was pushed just to have online learning. So there will be people who will be finding it difficult to adjust to that kind of learning. So the Lagos State, at least that of Lagos State is what I am sure of, that they have a well-established e-learning platform. Then those of the federal universities, like I'm running a PhD program in one of the universities in Nigeria, and we don't have any active e-learning platform. A PhD student, I can't access anything. There is nothing there to help us. We are just standing by, reading on our own, and then there's even no communication from the school to us, the students. So we are just there waiting for the pandemic to go by. So there is no help to go through this shock. There is nothing the federal government is doing. But then the private universities, I also have a friend whose children are in the private universities. They are having, she tells me that their children is always busy, that they are very well taken care of, but then that adjustment is also put into place. They also have workshops and and all those things to help them get through this, navigate this e-learning platform to the best that they can, and be able to achieve their goals as a student and not lag behind from what the school and the world is giving to their own students. So this is what I have for the questions. My own remark about all this is that I pray that this pandemic ends and that we can all go back to our normal activities. But then I know that there is a new normal. It's no longer what we used to have. The new normal, the introduction of e-learning into our education system, that will not go anywhere. So I plead the government should look into our education system, invest in the Nigerian education system. We have a lot of resources here going to waste. But if they should at least allot the budget, the maximum budget or minimum budget that the UNESCO advised that each country should have in their country, and properly invest and monitor the usage of that budget, Nigeria will be a better place. Nigeria will become, we won't be running out of our country just to and hope that one of these movements, that all these talks that we are giving and all these exposures that we are bringing out, that the government should really take them into place and revive our education system. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, Uzo. So let's move on to Eni, and please let's just try and keep it as short and succinct. Eni? Eni, are you there?
Yes?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. On whether I think it's wise for all school kids to resume school or just allow candidates due to exams. I would like to first point out that even though it's winter here in we are approaching winter and the temperatures are quite very low, I believe that a lot of children can be accommodated in the schools. The reasons being, according to the researches that have been put across, the children are the least affected. But if we do not take the children to school, the problem is we are going to be left with children who are going to be at home with no caregivers, since most of their parents are going to be now going back to work. So it will actually another problem that we are going to be having.
Hello, we can hear you.
Feedback from where you are. I think has any tried? Hello, any? Hello, any?
All right. I was saying, despite the fact that it's winter, I think these children should be sent back to school because we do not have a cure yet in the next 2 years or so, especially for countries like us in Africa. So if we are going to say we are going to keep the children at home, still the parents who are going to work are going to bring the virus home, which will still affect the children. So what we need is to put in place precautionary measures in our respective schools so that the highest hygiene is put in place, and also we should have our children going through what we call hot sitting, whereby a class that used to be having 20 learners, it can have 10 learners in each class, and then some come in the morning, some come in the others come in the afternoon. And then we have got some private institutions here in South Africa which employ educators, but in times like this, they do not pay them. And the government is also not paying these educators.
You seem to have lost. Winnie is.
Amy, you can continue.
Okay, I was saying with these educators in private institutions, they need an income. So if we are going to say learners will still stay at home, then we are running a danger of pushing learners who do not have proper information to take them to the next grade, which becomes a problem to be inherited by the educator who's going to take those children next year. So I think these children, they need each other to learn. They need that contact, so they really need to go back to school. We can even look for the involvement of specialists and for other governments or nations like Madagascar, whose debt are close to zero. We can actually borrow some of their expertise so that our children go to school. And then on how the government will deal with this shock, I think most governments, especially the South African government, it's not ready. Since some officials are capitalizing on things like sanitizers and masks, giving them to people for free, they are selling them. Rip off the already poor population. And also I've seen some of the officials are actually using it to campaign, to say, you know, it's us, this party that is bringing in such. So it's now something that is really out of the general population's hands. And from the look of things, it's failing to ease the pandemic consequences. Then, other than that, corruption is now rife. You have to know who so that you get masks and sanitizers at normal prices. So if the people are to go to work, people are going to go to school, there is going to be mass production, and there is not going to be any black market selling of these goods that we need in schools. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any Jackie? Jackie, you're on mute. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Yes.
So let's keep it short because we don't have much time. Actually, we are out of time.
Okay, so I'll only be a minute or two. Now, the UK has, of course, different states. We got the school reopening in England has been scheduled for the 1st of June. Of course, it's only for a few children. So the year ones and the year 6 for primary, and then for secondary, those kids who are doing exams next year, the year 10s, are also going to be seeing their teachers for a short time before the end of the academic year. Now, for Wales, the First Minister, because Welsh First Minister say that he's not particularly sure when the reopening will occur. I think he's communicating with Westminster and finding out when that will happen. Now, the Irish government plans to reopen in September. However, it will be based on scientific advice that they get. So meaning the Irish government, the Northern Ireland, sorry, not the Irish, Northern Ireland government, they are trying to reopen in September. But then it will be based, they're very, very clear that it will be based on scientific advice, the advice that they get. So there may not be full school opening in September in Northern Ireland. Now, Scotland, on the other hand, plans to reopen in August, I think sometime in mid-August. Now, the thing is, they plan to have a kind of blended learning format where they combine in-school learning with home-based learning. And that's what Nicola Sturgeon has said, who's the First Minister of Scotland, has said that they're going to do in Scotland. So they're not reopening now, they're reopening sometime in August, mid-August, which is quite strange because the academic year begins in September and August is the summer holiday. So they plan to do that, I think maybe in preparation for September, for the new academic year. So that's what's happening in Britain in terms of school reopening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And last but not least, Millicent, please also keep it short. Millicent, are you here? Millicent, let's see whether we still have her on. Hello, Millicent. We still have her online. I'm not sure why. Hello, Winnie, are you able to reach Millicent?
No, I'm not able to. I'm trying to unmute her, but I can't seem to. So you can just move to the
Okay,
next.
as we try to. So, okay, so again, we are very grateful for the 4 speakers actually sharing your insights and different perspectives on the impact of COVID on education in these different jurisdictions. And as Winnie mentioned, this is actually the second part of our series. So last week we had a similar series, and we had speakers or teachers actually sharing from, we had teachers from India, Germany, Kenya, and I think one more country.
Uganda.
And Uganda, yes, and Uganda. And so what I will do, I think I'll just turn it back to Winnie to let us know where we go from here. In case Winnie you're able to reach Millicent, I think she's trying, then you can allow her to just give her final thoughts, and then you can close for us, Winnie.
All right, Millicent, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You can give us your final remarks.
Okay, just answering the 2 questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, okay. There's a chart. Someone wanted to get to know whether schools should be opened or not. And I'll give my views on that in 2 perspectives. In that all schools should be, all school children should be left at home. Meanwhile, the government can put finances into education. And then in areas where there is no electricity, like for instance, solar panels can be installed to support online learning. Life is not bought. We need to take care of these lives. So children can stay at home. On the other side, if COVID is here to stay with us, then we must learn how to live with it. But then we have to inculcate learning in as much as we have this thing with us. Learning has also to continue. And I believe this disease is very deadly. And I just want to echo. I'm here. I just want to echo what CS Magoha said. Dead children do not sit for exams, and that is very true. In as much as we are trying to come up with measures on how we're going back to school, we should remember our children on the ground. They're the ones who will suffer most. Then the other question was whether system of government is better in dealing with this pandemic. In Kenya, we're still shocked. This is a new thing to us. And there's a task force on the ground gathering information from different TSC, different parastatals, from the TSC, Ministry, and many, many others, on how schools are going to be opened. So we are still waiting upon the government to give us directives. And I will end this by saying, if we treat this disease normally, it will definitely treat us.
Okay, we seem to have lost Miss Millicent, but we are glad we got her final remarks and her responses to the questions we had. So we have actually finished what we intended to do today, and we are very grateful to all our panelists who availed time to have this conversation with us, because it's a very important conversation. And even as we discuss the education sector, we cannot do that without listening to the teachers, who in this case we consider as the frontline workers in the education sector. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate that you could be here and you could give us your insights, even to our participants. Thank you so much for making time. And just to inform you, At the IEA, we've been having a series of webinars. So we'll be having another series on on Friday. So you can look out on our website for the posters. If it will be an area that will interest you, please make sure you book your slots and join us on Friday as we have these conversations. And to the teachers and those who are interested in the education sector, next week, we will, at a day to be decided, we will be speaking to the students just to hear what they also have to say, because we are discussing them right now. So it would be also important to hear what they feel and what how learning has been for them. So having said that, thank you so much for your time. We are glad to have had you, and see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Winnie. Bye.